You're holding me back. She said it with a smile, standing in our kitchen like she was announcing the weather, not ending a marriage. I remember the hum of the fridge, the smell of burnt coffee, and the way her phone lit up face down on the counter right after she said it, like it already knew the script. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask who put that idea in her head. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling something inside me go quiet in a way that felt permanent. My name is Ethan Cole. 39 years old, project manager, the guy who shows up early, stays late, pays the mortgage on time, and thought stability meant loyalty. For 10 years, I'd built a life that ran like clockwork, 6:30 a.m. alarm, commute through I-95 traffic, weekends fixing things around the house while she scrolled through messages I never saw. Madison used to call that dependable. Lately, she called it small. I noticed the shift months ago, the way she started dressing sharper, talking faster, laughing at things that had nothing to do with me. There were more networking dinners, more late nights, more conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. I told myself it was ambition. I told myself this was what growth looked like. But growth doesn't usually come with secrets. The first crack wasn't loud. It was subtle, like a draft you can't place. Her phone flipped face down. A name I didn't recognize lighting up the screen at 11:47 p.m. A message preview that disappeared too fast to read. Ryan Carter. I didn't know him then, but I knew the tone. You don't need to read the whole message when you've been married long enough to recognize distance. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because part of being a man like me is believing problems can be fixed if you just keep showing up. So I showed up harder. I worked longer hours, pushed for a raise, planned a weekend trip she said she was too busy to take. Every effort felt like pouring water into something that had already cracked open underneath. And then came that night. The sentence. You're holding me back. It wasn't just what she said. It was how easy it was for her to say it. Like I had already been replaced in her mind by something, or someone, better. I glanced at her phone again, still glowing faintly against the marble counter, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that settles in slow and heavy, like concrete being poured. I nodded once, like I was agreeing to terms she didn't even realize she just set. Then I won't hold you back anymore, I said, calm, steady, like I was discussing a work schedule. She blinked, surprised by how easy that came out of me, like she expected resistance, maybe even a fight. But I was already somewhere else in my head, running numbers, replaying conversations, connecting details that suddenly made too much sense. Because what Madison didn't understand, what she had never needed to understand, was how much of her world was quietly tied to mine. And standing there in that kitchen, with the fridge humming and her phone lighting up again with that same name, I made a decision she wouldn't feel, until everything started to disappear. I did not sleep that night, not because of anger, but because my mind would not stop organizing things that had been out of place for months, like files finally falling into the right folders. By 6 a.m, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad, coffee gone cold, writing down everything that had my name attached to it, the house, the joint accounts, the consulting contracts she never paid attention to, the quiet investments I had built over the years while she was busy chasing something she could not even define. Madison woke up late, moving through the house like nothing had changed, like words did not have weight, like saying something did not mean it had already set something in motion. She grabbed her phone before she grabbed coffee, thumbs moving fast, a small smile she did not realize I could see. I watched her for a second, not as her husband, but as someone stepping outside of a situation and finally seeing it clearly. I have a dinner tonight, she said, casual, already halfway out the door. I nodded. Of course you do. No questions. No tension. That was new, and I could tell it threw her off for half a second before. She shrugged it away. By 9 o'clock, I was in my truck, parked outside a small office building 20 minutes from downtown, engine off, hands steady on the wheel. The sign on the door read Carter and Blake Consulting. I sat there for a moment, letting the name settle, Ryan Carter. Then I stepped out, walked inside, and asked the receptionist a simple question that sounded harmless on the surface. I am here to review partnership agreements connected to my assets. That was the moment everything shifted from emotion to structure, from marriage to strategy. Because while Madison was planning her way out, she had no idea I had already started closing every door behind her. I have sat in plenty of offices in my life, but that one felt different, quieter, sharper, like every word spoken inside it carried weight that did not fade when you walked out. The man across from me did not ask about feelings, did not care about who said what at dinner or who hurt who. He asked one thing. What is legally yours? I slid the documents across the table, contracts, account structures, property records, everything I had built over 10 years of steady, unremarkable discipline. He flipped through them with the kind of focus that comes from seeing problems as patterns, not emotions. Most of this, he said, tapping the stack once, is protected as long as you move before she does. That sentence settled in deeper than anything Madison had said the night before. Before she does. Timing was not just important, it was everything. I spent the next 3 hours rewriting the foundation of a life she thought she understood, separating joint accounts, restructuring ownership, moving funds into protected holdings that required signatures she did not have access to, updating beneficiary designations that had not been touched since we first signed them years ago, when everything felt permanent. There was no drama in it, no raised voices, just quiet decisions stacking on top of each other like bricks forming a wall she would not see until she ran into it. By the time I walked out of that office, the sun was higher, traffic louder, the world moving like nothing had changed, but everything had. I sat in my truck for a minute, hands resting on the steering wheel, and felt something settle into place inside me, not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. That afternoon, I went to the bank we had used for years, the one where they knew my name, where they had watched our accounts grow slowly over time. I sat down with a manager and used the same calm tone I had used all morning. I need to restructure access and permissions on these accounts. No explanation. No story. Just instructions. By the time I left, the accounts Madison thought she could move freely were no longer hers to touch without going through layers she did not even know existed. When I got home that evening, the house looked the same couch, same framed photos, same quiet hum of a life that from the outside still made sense. Madison was getting ready, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, her phone buzzing on the counter again with that same name lighting up the screen. Ryan Carter. She picked it up quickly this time, stepping into the hallway, lowering her voice just enough to think I could not hear. I did not need to hear the words anymore. I understood the pattern. When she came back, she looked at me like she was waiting for something, maybe a question, maybe a reaction, maybe the version of me that used to try to hold things together. I gave her none of that. You heading out? I asked, like it was any other night. She nodded, a little slower this time, studying me like she was trying to figure out what had changed. Yeah. It might be late. I smiled once, small, controlled. Take your time. And as she walked out the door, heels clicking against the floor, car starting in the driveway, I stood there in the quiet and realized something she did not. She thought she was stepping into a new life. She had no idea she had just stepped out of the only one that was holding her up. The next morning felt almost normal, and that was the strangest part, sunlight cutting through the blinds, coffee brewing, the quiet rhythm of a house pretending nothing had shifted beneath it. Madison walked in around 8:30, heels in her hand, hair slightly out of place, moving like someone who had already decided where she belonged, and it was no longer here. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She just poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter like we were two people sharing space instead of a life. We should talk, she said, but her tone was off, not uncertain, just procedural, like she was checking a box. I nodded once, giving her the floor. She took a breath, eyes steady, and said the words she had probably rehearsed. I think we want different things now. I need more. More growth, more opportunity, more. She paused, searching for the right word, then settled on one that said everything without saying it. More. I watched her as she spoke, not interrupting, not reacting, just listening like I was in a meeting that had already reached its conclusion before it started. When she finished, she looked at me like she expected resistance, maybe questions, maybe a reason to feel justified. Instead, I gave her the only thing she was not prepared for: agreement. Then you should go get that, I said calmly. No edge. No bitterness. Just permission. That was the moment something flickered in her expression, confusion, maybe even a trace of doubt, because she had built this exit expecting friction, not an open door. You are okay with that? She asked, slower now, like she was trying to find the version of me she thought she knew. I held her gaze steady, controlled. You said I was holding you back. I am not going to do that anymore. The room went quiet after that, heavier than any argument could have made it. She nodded eventually, more to herself than to me, like she had just convinced herself this was the right move. What she did not realize, standing there with her coffee in a house that was no longer truly hers, was that the decision she thought she was making freely had already been accounted for, planned for, and quietly set in motion long before she ever found the words to say it out loud. She started packing that same afternoon, not in a rush, not like someone being forced out, but like someone upgrading, folding clothes carefully, selecting what mattered and leaving behind what did not, as if 10 years could be sorted into neat piles in a matter of hours. I watched from the doorway for a moment, not stepping in, not offering help, just observing the way she moved through the house like it had already become temporary to her. I will stay with Ryan for a while, she said without looking at me, like it was a logistical update, not a statement that carried weight. I nodded once. That makes sense. No argument. No hesitation. That calm unsettled her more than any confrontation could have. I could see it in the way she paused, just slightly, like she was waiting for something to push against. But there was nothing. By the time she zipped her suitcase, the house felt quieter, not empty, just different, like something unnecessary had been removed and the structure was settling into its real shape. She rolled the suitcase past me, stopped for a second, and said, I think this is the right decision. I met her eyes, steady, controlled. For you, it probably is. That was the last exchange before the door closed behind her, the sound softer than I expected, almost polite. I stood there for a moment, listening to the engine start, the car pulling out of the driveway, the life we had built together driving away without looking back. Then I walked into the living room, picked up my phone, and opened the account dashboard she had not checked in months. The numbers on the screen were already different, cleaner, separated, aligned with decisions she had no idea had been made. Within the hour, I finalized the last step, removing her access completely, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as structure catching up to reality. And somewhere across town, probably sitting in a place she thought was an upgrade, Madison still believed she had just stepped into something better, not realizing the ground beneath her had already started to disappear. The first few days passed without noise, and that silence was louder than anything we had ever argued about. No calls, no messages, no late-night attempts to reopen what she had already walked away from, just absence settling into routine. I went to work, came home, made dinner for one, the kind of quiet that would have felt empty a month ago. But now felt clean, like a space that finally matched reality. Meanwhile, her life started showing up in small ways, not through her, but through the edges. Social media posts she forgot I could still see, photos of rooftop bars, expensive drinks, city lights behind her, Ryan standing just close enough to suggest something without saying it outright. She looked happy, or at least the version of happy people perform when they believe they have upgraded their lives. I did not react. I did not check twice. I just noted it the same way I would note a number on a spreadsheet, information, nothing more. By the end of the week, the first crack appeared, small, almost invisible if you were not paying attention. A notification from the bank, an attempted access from a device not recognized, her device. It was denied. 10 minutes later, another attempt. Denied again. I imagined her sitting somewhere, phone in hand, that small crease forming between her brows as something that had always worked suddenly did not. She tried a third time, and that was when the system flagged it completely. Restricted access. That was the moment her world began to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, the way everything important had shifted so far. That evening, my phone buzzed for the first time since she left, her name lighting up the screen, not a message, just a call. I let it ring. Not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because whatever she was starting to feel now was something she needed to experience without interruption. When it stopped, a text came through seconds later. "Ethan, something is wrong with the accounts." I read it once, then set the phone down, letting the silence return, because for the first time, she was beginning to understand that nothing was wrong, everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. The second message came less than an hour later, longer this time, less controlled, like the edges were starting to fray. "Ethan, I cannot access anything. My card is declining. Did you change something?" I read it sitting at my kitchen table, the same spot where she once stood and told me I was the problem, and for a moment I could almost see the shift happening in real time, confusion turning into pressure. I did not answer right away. I let the message sit, the same way she had let distance sit between us for months, unanswered, unresolved, ignored until it became unavoidable. By the afternoon, another crack appeared, this one louder. A missed call. Then another. Then a voicemail. Her voice was different now, still controlled, but tighter, like she was trying to hold something together that was slipping through her fingers. "Hey. I think there is some kind of mistake. The bank said my access was removed. Can you call me?" A mistake. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting that word settle. There was no mistake. There was only structure finally catching up to truth. That evening, the illusion she had been living in started to show its first real fracture. A post disappeared from her profile. Then another. The polished version of her new life began to thin out, less noise, less certainty. And then came the part she did not expect, the part no one tells you when you step into something built on appearances. Ryan Carter was not built for pressure. I knew that before she did. By the third day, the company he worked for was being mentioned in quiet conversations, not headlines, not yet, but enough. Contract issues? Delayed payments? Questions about numbers that did not line up. Nothing explosive, just enough instability to make the ground feel less solid. And when the ground shifts, people like Ryan do what they always do, they protect themselves first. That night, her name lit up my phone again, not a call this time, just a single message that said more than everything before it. "Ethan, where is my money?" I looked at the screen for a long second, then set the phone down without replying, because for the first time, she was asking the right question, just far too late to change the answer. By the end of the week, everything that looked polished from the outside had started to crack in ways you could not filter or edit. The first real break came quietly, not from her, but from the edges of the world she thought she had stepped into. Ryan stopped showing up in her posts completely. No more rooftop photos, no more carefully framed smiles, just silence where he used to stand. That kind of silence does not happen without a reason. 2 days later, I heard it from a source that did not deal in rumors. One of the contracts tied to his firm had been frozen, not cancelled yet, but enough to trigger internal reviews, enough to slow cash flow, enough to make people start asking questions they should have asked months ago. And when money slows down, loyalty disappears even faster. That same night, my phone lit up again, her name flashing across the screen, and this time I answered. Not because I felt obligated, but because I knew the moment had arrived. Her voice was different, no control left, just pressure. "Ethan, I need to understand what is going on. Ryan said things are complicated right now. I just need access to my accounts until this settles." I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet stretch for a second before I spoke. "Those accounts are not yours anymore." Silence on the other end, heavy, confused, the kind that comes when reality does not match expectation. "What do you mean they are not mine?" she asked, slower now, like she was trying to catch up to something already moving past her. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain everything. I just told her the truth in the simplest form possible. They were never separate from me. You just never noticed. Another pause, longer this time, and I could almost hear the shift happening, the realization that what she thought was independence had always been supported by something she chose to walk away from. Ethan. I did not know. She started, but stopped herself, because there was nothing she could say that would change the structure already in place. Outside, the night was quiet, steady, unchanged, and for the first time since she left, she was finally standing in the reality she had created, without the safety net she had spent years taking for granted. 3 weeks later, she was standing in front of my house again, not the way she left it, not confident, not certain, just smaller somehow, like the world had adjusted her expectations without asking permission. I saw her through the window before I opened the door, suitcase by her side, phone in her hand like it had not stopped being a lifeline since the day everything started slipping. When I stepped outside, she did not speak right away, just looked at me like she was trying to find something familiar in a version of me that no longer existed. Ryan is gone, she said finally, her voice flat, not dramatic, just empty. The company is under investigation. He said he needed space. I nodded once, not surprised, not even interested in the details, because outcomes like that do not come out of nowhere, they build slowly, the same way everything else had. She took a step closer, hesitating like the ground might shift again. I made a mistake, she said, and this time there was no performance behind it, just reality catching up all at once. I held her gaze steady, calm, the same way I had from the moment she first said those words in the kitchen. No, I said quietly. You made a choice. The air between us stayed still after that, no anger, no raised voices, just the weight of something final settling into place. She looked down, then back up, like she was waiting for something else, maybe forgiveness, maybe a door to open the way it always had before. But this time, there was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to fix. The structure had already changed, and it was not built for her anymore. I stepped back slightly, not as rejection, just distance, and for the first time since she left, she understood completely. Not through words, not through explanation, but through absence. And as she stood there, holding on to a life that no longer existed, I realized something simple, something clear. I did not take anything from her. I just stopped holding it together.